This is Six African Trade Talks. Six African Trade Talks is a media partner of Intra-Africa Trade Fair, an initiative of Afreximbank in collaboration with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat and the African Union. This is Six African Trade Talks. Today, our guest is David Ogundeko, founder and CEO of Funema. David, welcome to Six African Trade Talks. How are you?
I'm doing great today. It's a nice weather today in Cape Town and happy to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Great to have you. Before we start, we'd like to hear a word from our sponsors. Unlock your business potential. Are you fundable? How do you know? And where do you even start to check? Introducing the AfCFTA 24 fundable process, a game changer for African businesses ready to scale. This proven process helps you access your fundability, identify gaps, and position your business for growth and investment. Contact us on WhatsApp at +971 55 443 8056 to get the link and start your fundable process today. Don't miss this opportunity to unlock doors to growth and success for your business. Get fundable now. So, David, can you share your journey with us and how your faith, poetry, and entrepreneurship have shaped you today?
It's interesting that you mentioned faith, poetry, and entrepreneurship. I've always been like an entrepreneur, even while I was in secondary school in Vegas. I remember buying and selling hand-drawn comic books with a bit of profit and top. And it was like my side hustle. It's just a way to make some extra pocket money. And when I left, I thought I was going to be a poet in my early adult years, in my early 20s, because I've always been a writer. I love writing. I love reading books. I love reading fiction as well. And I actually thought I was going to be a poet, but that was changed drastically by some encounter I met. I was trying to impress some girl. And then when she asked me what I did, I said, "Oh, I'm actually a poet." And then she asked, "How does anyone make money from that?" I couldn't answer her. So I thought, okay, let me figure out how to make money and impress this girl. And that's what made me take my entrepreneurship journey a bit more serious. And from a faith perspective, I grew up in a family that took faith very seriously. Because my mom at the time was a pastor in the church. And she was just a good leader. So I grew up reading the Bible. I grew up knowing about God, about Jesus Christ. And I think that, and I just had a natural affection, natural love for faith. I wouldn't exactly say I've been a perfect Christian throughout my years, 40 odd years of being alive, but it's been a very interesting journey for me. And what I can always say is that in terms of what's driving me and keeping me focused in my journey, in what to do, being purpose-led, it has been my faith. My faith is my foundation, it's my bedrock. And everything else that makes me who I am today, is built on that bedrock. In my loneliest moments, I can always come back to the Bible. I can always come back to my relationship with God. And it's always given me an advantage because even when I failed in business, I've failed multiple times actually. Funema will be my third enterprise, not even the longest one, because my second company, I got it for about 7+ years, and then I lost the company. The wife back in 2015. And then I started in 2017 after working for the VC company that I see first in 2016, 2017. I was one of the MDs in Lagos. How I see my faith helping me is that because of my belief in Christ Jesus and the ability to have faith, which is to believe things even though they're not real, to call things that be even though they're not, I've been able to apply that to take my failures and turn them into opportunities for success. And that's what's been driving me and keeping me going today. And it was only later I realized that what I do at Funema, the model that we have, is built on a principle known as Redemptive business model, where you delay or forgo profit for a while, just to really solve problems, and then create a scenario where win outcomes can materialize. Because the way the world system is, win outcomes, it's very difficult to have a win outcome because it's just very difficult, especially in Africa. It's actually quite difficult. If you're not overly focused on the profits, you find it very difficult to stay in business. And if profit becomes the primary driver, then impact becomes an afterthought. And the way Africa is, we need a lot of impact. So I later realized that Funema's impact first approach is actually connected to a redemptive business model, which is kind of like a kingdom-driven model where you sacrifice so that you can have redemption, you can have without constraint one involved. And that's the foundation of Funema and how we go about what we do. And when my poetry comes into play, so poetry has always made me to say things creatively and to say things differently. And I see that kind of thought process affecting how we build financial models for the companies and Funema, and also how we engage with our founders. We can go first into their minds to understand their vision, and then use that to build a business case and to build a financial case for the startup. And that's very different because the finance world is purely about the numbers. What's the numbers saying? What's the market saying? What's the data saying? Before then evaluating the vision. And I think that in many ways, many founders are undercut it and undercuts the vision of founders and undervalues the potential of what they're doing. But we believe that there's a spiritual side to businesses because founders create things that are not there. And everything we see today it started in one entrepreneur's mind. Even these podcasts that we're doing, the tools that we're using today started in someone's mind. And because they believe completely in what they're doing, they were able to bring that vision or that idea into reality and made it physical. So we believe that every business is actually spiritual to some level. So yes, so being a poet gives me that ability to say things differently and get into the mind of the founder and really understand what they're thinking and what they're dreaming, and to dream alongside the founder and then bring that to drive the objective outcomes that can be measured by numbers and measured by investments.
Interesting. What a concept. And it's an intriguing concept, if I must say. Tell me, can you explain how it's been transforming last mile economies in Africa through venture building? What has that process been like?
Yes. I think what I learned while I was working at Seastars is I learned two major things. One is understanding excellence in building ventures. So at the time I was working at Seastars, we had a venture studio, and my role was functioning as a year at the academy that's also founders and trained and mentored in working in ventures that we invested in. And Seastars has this culture of excellence. If you were to get anyone from Seastars to work in an organization, you can be rest assured that they're going to bring a high level of excellence. They don't always advertise themselves very publicly like other investment firms out there, but excellence is a culture that runs deep. And I think that was something that I learned from Seastars. But the other lesson that I learned was that I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do traditional venture capital because by nature of venture capital by nature is about looking for high growth outcomes in hyper speed, timescales and timelines. And that sort of pushes GPs of fund managers to invest in really asset-light enterprises, or should I say ideas, which is great if you have an environment or an economy that is fairly balanced, where there's large distribution of infrastructure and opportunities and purchasing power. So I'm basically describing what you find in your OECD countries, or the global north. But when you come to the global south, where from an infrastructure perspective, we're still lacking a lot. So what it means is that founders who are trying to solve real problems cannot avoid building their own infrastructure. That's just the way it is. And I could see that venture capital could not address those founders. So there's a big gap in that space. But not even just there. I also realized that when it comes to the early stages of building a venture, for a founder, it's very hard for them to access capital because there's no traction. Unlike in Silicon Valley, where many founders were probably first-time founders, maybe they've worked in a startup, or they've worked in established organizations like Google, or like IBM, or Uber, or like big startup names that can give them credibility to convince investors to give them capital. But when you come to Africa, that's not the case. Many founders are homegrown founders who work in hustling, and many of them are entrepreneurs by necessity and not by choice. It's because they just couldn't really find any education. So what that means is that they lack the corporate education, because there's some things you cannot learn in colleges. You have to learn it by working in a structured environment. And these founders tend to lack that kind of education, that kind of life skills. And it denies them the skill set required to build ventures that can really take in venture capital and provide a return that will make sense to VC funds. So there's a gap there, but the reality is that these founders are actually solving real problems. And they understand the market dynamics, they understand the relationships required to make solutions real. Because Africa is a very peculiar place. And regardless of the country, we have a peculiar environment, politically, financially, infrastructure-wise, or whatever the case. We do have a very peculiar environment. I'm actually hoping that the AfCFTA agreement can address that in the future. I'm looking forward to see how that's going to play out. But Africa has a peculiar environment. So you need homegrown founders who understand the politics and the lay of the land to solve real problems, but they don't have the skills required to build venture scale businesses or ventures. So that was the gap that I saw. And I think that venture building can be that missing element to help those founders. Because these founders tend to address problems in last mile economies, which is underserved markets or underserved demographics, people with possibly low purchasing power, or people with very poor tech adoption awareness in terms of using technical tools or using software tools to solve problems or to lead their day-to-day lives. We believe in targeting those founders. And venture building means that at the very early stage of them building their ventures, they can access them with the skills that they don't have the money to hire for. Because to build a successful startup, we need to have access to the right talents to fill the knowledge gaps that the founder or you as a founder would have. But the problem is, without the capital, they cannot pay someone who has a bad education to join their company. And without talent, they can get traction. And without traction, they can't raise capital. So it's like a chicken and egg situation. So we thought that, you know what, let's take away the chicken and egg situation and provide that talent that they need in the first 4 years of building their venture that they can afford to pay for in exchange for equity. What we've seen is that sort of neutralizes the problem and enables new solutions to then materialize, which is like working with Funema for the first 1 or 2 years. Now they have the tracking they need to get access to capital. So I think, or we actually believe that approach can be useful, especially in last mile business models. Why? Because it means that we can make principal investments or principal decisions to support companies that may not necessarily provide VC scale outcomes in the first 4 years. And that means that we can take risks that traditional venture capital funds cannot take because they're limited by IRR expectation and a timeline to an exit, scale economy, vast distribution of really large market size. A VC fund cannot invest in a company that provides that. But being a venture builder, we can actually make the proprietary investments or decision to go to where VC funds cannot go, and then create an environment that can then enable VC funds to then come in afterwards. So that's how I see venture building. That's a really nice situation, very cool to address last mile problems.
Interesting. As an entrepreneur myself, I was like, why did I know you when I started? Because one of the key things as well, or key challenges, if you're a young entrepreneur, just even the mindset of employing someone older than you. And yet that's where you can get this knowledge and skill. So when working with businesses like yours can actually help even young entrepreneurs. So this is really great. As someone who's deeply involved in building ecosystems for small businesses, what do you see as the key challenge and opportunities for African entrepreneurs in the tech-enabled sector? Maybe in a minute, what would you say?
In a minute, wow, that's a very short time because Africa has systemic problems. It's very hard to say that is one key thing that they're lacking. I think we need more government participation, and because governments can provide patient capital, or they can provide an environment that will enable local angel investors to then participate. I have a mentor, Tommy Davis, is someone I really admire and respect, and he has a program called Mentor Driven Capital. I think you have to also invite him on this podcast. I'm happy to make a recommendation as well. And his belief is that if angel investors who've got capital, but beyond just the capital, can bring about the experience to the table and mentor founders in addition to the capital they provide to the founders, that can really have systemic change. Because here in Africa, a lot of the capital flowing into the venture ecosystem is foreign capital. And foreign capital has its own expectation and in a very short time span. And it means that the impact of its ability to have high impact is very limited. We need more options on the table, especially local funds to solve the challenge or to address the challenge. Because if at the crux of the matter, yes, I can say that capital is not the primary problem a founder needs, but if you look at every other problem, they need funding to provide a few or to fuel the mechanics to bring about a solution. Because at the end of the day, if a real challenge a founder has is talent, they also need money to hire people. If the real challenge the founder has access to market, money has to be deployed to provide that access to finance or to fund go-to-market strategies. So capital still remains a key backbone problem that needs to be addressed. But I don't think private funding can do that. I think that the government needs to be heavily involved. It is either to provide non-dilutive capital to very early stage founders, or they create an environment which could be tax rebates for angel investors coming into the space to now bring not just the capital, but their mentorship, because they've got industry experience, which can then guide founders, and not just industry experience, they could also bring their networks as well, open the right doors to provide commercial validation, especially in the very early stage, which can then help the founders to either build and scale or to pivot if the model is not working. Because founders many founders are isolated, and they have to figure out a lot of the problems by themselves without the right guidance to support them. So I think capital, but patient capital, is very much needed.
You just brought some memory. I remember seeing an article a few days ago from the UAE government where I think they've set aside between 80 or 180, if I'm not mistaken, $1 million just to support entrepreneurs and to grow entrepreneurship. So certainly, if government could play a key role there, that would help, especially in most of these African countries. Before we continue, we'd like to hear a word from our sponsor. So David, you've supported numerous startups and ecosystems across Africa. What advice would you offer to entrepreneurs who are just starting and looking to scale their businesses?
I would say, so it's different advice actually, for starting and scaling, not the same thing. But for starting, I would say, build what you're designed to do. And I see many founders struggle. What they're working on is more of a copycat model. You can see that fintech is what's trending, is getting a lot of funding, and they've got a bit of time to spare. So maybe look for a problem in fintech and try to solve that. It's a very faulty foundation, because building a business is very tough. It's very hard. It's not always roses. And during the tough seasons, if there's no true passion driving the business or driving the founder, the business is bound to fail. But a founder who has an emotional connection to the problem will always find ways to succeed. I think, because without a strong connection to the problem, it's very hard to be resilient. That's the underlying thing, or the most fundamental thing that I've seen that is required, because we have companies in the portfolio that have been with us for about 7 years. And what I've seen is that the founders who really believe in the problem are the ones that survive really tough seasons of no capital, seasons of no revenue. They keep finding ways to innovate, to pivot, or to do micro adjustments to their business model. So for any founder looking to start, I would say, if you're not designed to do that, if there is no passion for the problem, then don't even bother starting. You might as well just go join a startup and then, because we all don't have to be entrepreneurs. Businesses also need employees at the end of the day, and they need people who can drive innovation inside of the organization. So I would advise such a founder to not even bother, because it can be very tough. And for any founder looking to scale, it depends on what you're scaling for. Because if you're venture backed, then you're scaling to provide venture returns to your investors. But if you're not venture backed, you're looking at scaling to expand your vision. It could be horizontal expansion into new countries, or it could be horizontal expansion, a vertical expansion into new verticals, to apply the same solution to maybe if you're currently in fintech, now you're trying to apply the same solution to aviation industry, whatever the case is. I would say that then becomes a problem of culture, because proving a business successfully in the early stages, scaling it means that you have to have the right culture to organize or to manage the team that would scale the business. So building the right culture that would attract the right talent, especially the right executive talent, is very key, because scaling is about replication at scale. And if the culture that the founder has will not enable the replication, it means it is going to be failure eventually. bad decisions were made, bad hiring decisions were made, bad monetary decisions were made, which could end up crippling the business long term, which could end up affecting the brand equity that the founder would have built over time, and possibly even destroy the business. So at the point of scaling, because once you've proven your business model, it's very easy to attract capital to scale. That really shouldn't be a problem. You can raise from investors, you can raise from private equity companies, you can even be acquired as well. But to scale means that you need to then amplify, and that means hiring more people. And if the culture is faulty, then that's going to be a problem, because that could end up killing the business in the long run.
It's interesting that you look at it that way, because as your host here on the podcast, I'm even enjoying the show, because the things that you're speaking of really touches the core of entrepreneurship. And one thing that came up is the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs fail, but the ones that are really born or that are really wired to be entrepreneurs will go through 4, 5, 6 times and until they get something that really succeeds. But those that give up, the minute it's not like they didn't know that they will give up. So if one thinks that they have that element of giving up, they are probably an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur. So they need to go and look at entrepreneur to support who has got the ability to take the risk, so to say. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah. Because founders they have the ability to absorb risks and then create something out of nothing. And that is not for everyone. I'm afraid to say it's not for everyone.
True. But the AfCFTA is pivotal. The AfCFTA is pivotal for African economic integration. From your perspective, what progress have you observed, and how can venture building initiatives like Funema accelerate its impact?
Yes, so that's a very interesting question, because I don't think I haven't seen enough progress yet. But what I've seen so far, and I think I will commend the South African government for doing this, is I'm seeing them begin to open up their borders a little bit more. So if you're in Ghana, you don't need a visa to enter South Africa. You can just come in and you have like a permit, like a 30-day or 90-day permit. And now they're thinking of offering that same opportunity to Nigerians. Because I think that there's no point to having that agreement if you can't easily travel between African countries. What's the point? It makes no sense. It's actually a mockery of the agreement. So governments need to open up their borders more, because see, entrepreneurs have this ability to figure things out themselves. Just give them an open door and they'll figure everything out themselves. And easy traveling between countries is very key. I don't think we need visas to go to another African country. Just having the AfCFTA as a sort of structure to enable easy travel, because once you have easy travel, then you have easy movement of goods back and forth. And venture building can be, and so that's all the progress that I've seen so far. I'm looking forward to start seeing progress in the areas of easy trade from a financial perspective in terms of currency, because that's a story problem. If I can sell to you in a currency that makes sense to you, that you can actually afford, and it's going to be a problem, then trade is almost non-existent. So I'm hoping to see more of that in the near future. But in terms of venture building, because what venture building really does is to provide expertise in very gray areas. And what I mean by gray areas is that when it comes to very early stage venture, there are too many unknowns. It's highly chaotic. And the way that we approach venture building is that we target founders who are in that state, 0 to 1. That's where we specialize in. And we've seen a lot of unknowns that we understand how to navigate that chaotic environment. So when it comes to cross-border trade in Africa, obviously there are a lot of unknowns. And what we are thinking of doing actually in Funema is to scale, because we also have a program where we train young talents on venture building. We've done that in Nigeria, we've done that in South Africa, we've had interest from Kenya, and we're looking at scaling our program. And we think that our venture builders could also help to address the unknowns. Imagine a network of venture builders that can easily help a founder from Nigeria to go to Ghana, because they already understand what they have to do. They can provide that advice, they can provide that guidance. So I believe that we could potentially work with the AfCFTA agreement to be that, should I say, boots on the ground in a sense, that are ready to enable entrepreneurship, because that's what we do, that's what we're focused on. And it just makes, because of the core values, the similarity in values, it makes that alignment actually quite possible. So that's how I see our venture building helping the AfCFTA agreement to move forward, basically, but to be successful.
I like the way you look at it. And I think they should actually have just segmented it and say the first thing that we're going to do is to make sure that Africans can travel.
Yeah.
The minute that a South African needs a visa to DRC, and that visa
That's a problem.
Takes a week or 2 weeks, that's already a problem, because someone that's coming from outside of the continent doesn't need a visa. So what is
exactly.
that? So certainly, I like your approach.
Exactly. Yeah, because entrepreneurs are very resourceful people. You don't need to give them, the moment the founder needs way too many resources, then that person is not an entrepreneur. Just give them access. They'll figure it out. They'll create that market. That's what entrepreneurs do. They have that ability to create out of nothing. But if the door is not open, then they can't really do anything.
I like that. Entrepreneurship is solving problems. The real entrepreneurs, the real entrepreneurs solve the biggest challenges that is in the, you're very right. Any podcast or book you'd like to recommend?
Well, let's start with the podcast, actually. So I would recommend Business Breakdowns. It's a very good podcast. I love it. And of course, 20-Minute VC by Harry Stebbins. Anyone in venture would want to listen to that. But for Business Breakdowns, I love how they take business models and break it down properly. And they take successful business models that are well-known companies in any industry whatsoever, and they just break it down. They take it through the history, how the founders came about the idea, what they've done successfully, what they've done wrong, and how they've recovered from those failures. And it's not just entertaining, it's actually quite informative. So I would highly recommend Business Breakdowns. It's easy to find. And for book, I'm currently reading Thinking in Systems, because I've realized that Africa has a systemic challenge. And the only way to solve it is by being systemic, having a model that has like a cluster theory attached to it, where you're combining multiple elements to address the market problems. For example, when we address companies or problems in underserved markets, we realize that by just investing in a fintech company that is probably offering a payment solution to, let's say, last mile, maybe merchants, tabletop merchants, or street merchants who are based in Lagos or based in Ibadan or states. That's a very failed model. Why? Because we have to assume that the merchant already has a mobile device or has access to electricity, so they can charge whatever POS system you give to them. They understand technology in the first place, and they're not exactly technology illiterate. They've got access to internet supply. So you can already see that just by offering them a fintech product, it's already dead on arrival. So what we look at doing, or what we've done, so is to look at complementary solutions. So if we're going to invest in a fintech company, then there's got to be an energy company beside that fintech company. There's got to be a company that is making access to internet easy and affordable, so that we can then ensure the guaranteed success of the first investment. Using a systemic approach to investing is very key, and that's what we've seen can actually work in Africa. Anything else is just a failure.
Amazing. Thank you very much. That marks the end of our podcast. Really enjoyed it. And I think...
Same here.
Yeah, I think we're going to need a follow-up, because the things that you have shared are quite interesting. I want to ask for something. I don't know if it's possible. Would you be in a position to do a 1-minute video clip?
What would I say? Is it right now?
Yeah, so it's just an idea. I thought so you see, our podcast has been predominantly been an audio only, but because now I've got so many followers on social media, I think to get people to, so to get people to get more people to see the podcast, I think just having a chat, I think one thing that I think would excite people to listen to the episode could be what could. So I could ask you a question to say, why do you think entrepreneurs lack funding in Africa? Or I don't know, what do you think is a key insight that you would want to share that could hook people?
Okay, a key insight I'll share, and it's like a pattern of behavior I've sort of noticed in the venture ecosystem. Founders are looking to build what VCs want to invest in, and I think that's horrible. That's a faulty place to start, because VCs are not the best we might be very smart, but it doesn't mean that we really understand business models. So what I would tell founders is focus on the problem, build what the customer wants to buy, do it successfully to make enough revenue, and do it very well to be profitable, and then VCs will come to you. Because VCs believe what VCs look out for is finding something successful and then amplifying that success so they can also benefit from it. So yeah, I would advise founders to not, it's nice to listen to VCs, but don't let VCs determine what to build. It's a very wrong foundation to start on, and it's guaranteed to make you fail in the long run.
Interesting. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to share my insights.
To support our show, please leave a review and share this episode. You can also connect with us on social media using the handles in our show notes, or visit our website, scixpodcast.africa. See you next time.